So I feel like there is a mandate to get tough with Ottawa. We've tried a few things that haven't worked, and just affirming that we are going to defend our constitutional authority and defend the fact that we are a signatory to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that shouldn't be controversial. I know it'll be a bit of a change because we've acted like a subordinate level of government, but I feel that when you are going to change the relationship, you should give notice. So I do believe that we have a mandate to get tougher with Ottawa, and this is just going to be the next phase in attempting to change that relationship.
Hi there, Brenna Owen with the Canadian Press. This question is actually from my colleagues in Ottawa. Do you support Danielle Smith's assertion that when a province doesn't agree with a federal law, the province can choose not to enforce it?
Look, Justin Trudeau has created divisions right across this country. He's turned west against east. He's turned provinces against the federal government. He has just yesterday caused a massive blow-up of meetings on healthcare funding. So they walked away without getting anything done. The problem is not any particular premier. The problem is the Prime Minister, who's created these divisions and caused people to feel like they have no choice but to engage in conflict with the nation's capital. I think we need to do is have a Prime Minister that will respect provincial jurisdiction, allow our resources to be developed, and get things done with the premiers, rather than picking pointless fights and dividing Canadians for political advantage.
I guess I do just want to press you a little bit more on that in terms of, I suppose under your government, how might you approach a province that was choosing not to enforce a federal law or expressing opposition to it?
Well, premiers have the right to express opposition to any law they want. That's as old as Canada. What I would do is, first of all, I'd stop attacking provincial jurisdiction. Trudeau passed Bill C-69, for example. Well, the courts have found that C-69, which attacks our energy sector, is unconstitutional. Now, we'll see how that plays out in the appeal to the Supreme Court. But it's not just premiers that are saying that the Prime Minister's laws violate provincial jurisdiction, it's the courts. So whether it's his carbon tax, which he's imposing on the provinces against their will, or it's his attack on our energy and resource sector, or it's his obsession with going after law-abiding, vetted, trained firearms owners, duck hunters, sport shooters. He constantly attacks provinces and people rather than working together to get things done. In a Poilievre government, you'll have a Prime Minister who will respect provincial jurisdiction and avoid these unnecessary fights.
Rick Bell, Calgary Sun. Gil knows me well enough to know I'm a sucker for those shiny baubles. But I think the question will probably, it is timely, and your answer may reflect on some of the concerns that were raised. Predictably, right after by-election victory last night, the new Premier of Alberta sent a letter to the Prime Minister talking about A, why don't you get rid of the carbon tax? B, why don't you pause the carbon tax increases? C, why don't you temporarily pause the federal fuel tax? In a two-page letter. None of that will come to you as a surprise. You've been questioned about it in the House of Commons as well by the opposition. Could you explain why those things are not, in your opinion, a good idea?
So thanks for the question. And let me start by congratulating Premier Smith on her by-election victory. I am sure that she and her government and our government will disagree about a lot of things. But I'm also sure that there are a lot of things that we will agree on and that we do agree on. And one thing I really learned during the NAFTA negotiations is that Canada is strongest and we're most effective when we're able to take a Team Canada approach. And when we are able to really try to focus on the areas where we agree and work together on those. I'm going to start by mentioning some of those and the areas many of them mentioned in that letter where I hope we can work together, and then I will address those areas of differences that you mentioned, Rick. So I was encouraged to see in that letter the reference to SMRs and to CCUS. Both of those are areas where our government is committed to making significant investments. Those investments were reinforced in the fall economic statement. And I very much look forward to working with Premier Smith and her government in investing together in those opportunities for Alberta, Albertan workers, and for Canada. There's a lot of work to be done. I think we can do a lot of positive things together. You mentioned a couple of other areas where we do disagree, and I'm going to touch on two of them. The first is the price on pollution. And I think it is worth pointing out that the price on pollution is in fact revenue neutral. None of that money falls to the federal bottom line. In all jurisdictions that have the backstop, that money is returned 100% to the jurisdiction. As people in Alberta know, that means a family of four is receiving more than $1,000 back. I also want to point out that the idea of a price on pollution has a pretty respectable Albertan intellectual lineage. Preston Manning was an early advocate of putting a price on pollution. He saw that, and I think he is right, as one of the most economically effective mechanisms for taking climate action. I agree with that view, and that's why our government is moving forward. One other area that I do want to mention that was mentioned in the letter is to really be clear with Canadians, today with Albertans, about the high priority our government places on fiscal responsibility. I really understand that today, as the global economy is slowing down, as we continue to face elevated inflation, one of the jobs of the federal government is not to make the work of the Bank of Canada harder. That is why Canada today has the lowest deficit in the G7. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. And we received some very important external validation of the soundness of our fiscal stewardship on Thursday evening after markets closed, after I tabled the fall economic statement. And that came from Moody's, the international credit rating agency, which reaffirmed Canada's AAA rating, that's the highest rating they have, with a stable outlook.
Yes, a quick follow-up. As I say, when the Premier was running for her party leadership, which having won that, she became the Premier. She hasn't faced the Alberta electorate yet. That's coming soon. She campaigned on two things, and one of them was that her predecessor, who you know well, former Premier Jason Kenney, didn't stand up to Ottawa enough, wasn't hard enough on Ottawa, didn't challenge Ottawa enough. And you are part of Ottawa in this drama. How do you respond when we now have a government led by somebody who did run on pushing back a lot more against the federal government? I understand you're going to talk about how you can work together on some files, but she also ran and won her leadership saying, we haven't done enough, we haven't pushed back, whether it's the Sovereignty Act or on other things, they're doing terrible things to us, and I am going to push harder than my predecessor. How do you react, especially in light of the fact that not only are you the Deputy Prime Minister, but you're also from, I believe, the Peace River country, So how do you react to all that, that we now have a premier who is going to be more assertive, dare I say combative, with Ottawa than even her predecessor?
Rick, if I may, that's a really good question. And like all good journalists, you've anticipated my answer. Look, I really, truly, and sincerely love Alberta. I really do. And I really, truly, and sincerely believe in the people of Alberta. And I really believe in what is special about this amazing province. I, therefore, really believe that my job, the federal government's job, is to do everything we can to roll up our sleeves and to work with the people of Alberta. I'm here today, Gil said we did have a great conversation, to work with Alberta union leaders. This afternoon, I'm going to have a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce to work with Alberta businesses, to work with Albertan political leaders, Alberta's elected political representatives. I have a good working relationship with Travis Toews, and I look forward to continuing to work with him, to work with Alberta MPs, one of whom is here right now. And we as a government are really going to continue to focus on what we can do as a federal government to support the people of Alberta, to support them with the challenges today, and to invest in the future, and to work with everyone in Alberta who wants to work with us.
Josh Aldridge, Calgary Herald. You just said you had a really good working relationship with Travis Toews. What's your working relationship like with Premier Smith? How would you characterize that?
I am looking forward to working with Premier Smith. Obviously, her direct counterpart is the Prime Minister, but I am happy to meet with her and work with her.
Alison Dempster, CBC. This is sort of a follow-up to Rick's question, but more specifically, I guess I'd just like to hear you speak about the Sovereignty Act that we're expecting. Premier Smith has said it's her first order of business November 29th when the legislature starts sitting. So when that bill arrives, what is the federal government's approach? What is your strategy?
So, Alison, one of the things that I learned during the NAFTA negotiations was never to comment on hypotheticals. We will look forward to working with the province of Alberta, and we'll look closely at any legislation the new premier tables and respond to it when we have something in writing to respond to.